a billion years after you die, your DNA can create another one of you, and a billion years is a dimension, and there are 9 dimensions in this reality, and after 9 dimensions will be infinity, and that and something like that. My very first memory, I'm singing "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream," and I stop and I go, maybe it is a dream. Maybe it's God's dream. It's not like I had a big like mystical experience or anything at that point, but that thought was in my mind and it never really left me.
Alex, it's amazing to see you. Welcome to the Sunseeker podcast. Alex, just for a little bit of context, is one of my mentors in the Shared Thousand Suns Academy, which is a Shakti yoga school that I'm one of the many members. And it's been an amazing beginning to my spiritual journey. And this podcast is kind of a little bit of a continuation of that. So thank you so much for joining. And I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction to you. You are a composer, you're a tantric yogi, you are studying a PhD in East to West psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and you describe yourself as a 21st century internal alchemist. So can you explain what that means, a 21st century internal alchemist?
Yeah. So, alchemy is one of those words that you hear thrown around a lot. It's kind of one of those things that's become a little bit generalized. It's a little bit like, there's even like an eyelash threading studio called like eyebrow alchemy or something in the town where I live. And so it's like everywhere right now. But basically, the idea with alchemy is about transmutation. And transmutation it's a little bit different concept than transformation, but it's similar. Transformation is basically just changing from one state to another.
Mm-hmm.
And we all go through transformations in life. You go from a transformation from being a child into a teenager into an adult. You go through transformation every time you change careers or go into a new life phase. Transmutation, it's a little bit different. It's the idea of taking one substance, one thing that just is what it is, and fundamentally changing its existence in a way without necessarily changing it fundamentally at the same time. It's this weird paradox. So like a great example that Manly P. Hall, who's this great esotericist, gives is the idea that transmutation is happening all the time. For example, when we think about sunlight going into the earth, becoming plants, mixing with the other elements, becoming plants that we then eat, and then somehow that turns into the human mind, which is capable of producing like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So in a way, we see the transmutation that's occurring is this change of substance from sunlight into plants into symphonies and back, right? So it's a much more weird esoteric thing. So basically what I mean when I say that I'm a 21st century alchemist, and I guess I should also give some background on like what alchemy technically is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea of turning like a base metal like lead, like something that nobody really likes all that much or cares for, has no real value, into gold.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the aim. That's the general sort of aim of alchemy. There's a lot of other forms and everything, but that's the metaphor. Okay. So the idea is that, in the 21st century, it's like, what are we doing? We have been one thing as we know it. We've been one kind of human. I've
Mm-hmm.
known myself through a certain personality, through a certain set of definitions. What does it look like to fundamentally transform my relationship to all of that? Who do I become when I do that? And what are the methods to doing that? So,
Wow. Yeah, I think that definitely when I've heard of alchemy, it's pretty much been the lead to gold in the book The Alchemist. But, just that title and that definition is something that's like incredible because people are going through changes all the time, and so and growth and death, etc. And so I think
Yeah.
that's a great way of describing what that really means. So you wear so many hats, I guess, and I'm just curious where your spiritual journey began. Like, when did you really first like know that you were inclined like for this work?
Yeah. 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 I mean, in a way, this is true for everybody, I suppose. It's like as long as I can remember when I look back on it. It's not that it was consciously in my mind as a kid necessarily, but my very first memory was I was sitting in the sandbox and I'm singing "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream." And I stop and I go, maybe it is a dream. Maybe it's God's dream. So that thought was there,
Yeah,
right? And it's not like I had a big like mystical experience or anything at that point. But then but that thought was in my mind, and it never really left me. And as a kid, I was really into science, like chemistry sets and stuff. And I grew up in the 90s, and like Jurassic Park came out at that time, and like DNA was all the rage. And like I was obsessed with DNA, like
mm,
freaking obsessed with DNA. And I even like wrote this. I used to come up with little like scientific theories and stuff that were really like esoteric cosmologies now that I look back on them. And like there's this thing that I wrote at one point that was like, a billion years after you die, your DNA can create another one of you, and a billion years is a dimension, and there are 9 dimensions in this reality, and after 9 dimensions will be infinity, and that and like and something like that. And so it's like just that stuff is like always in me somehow, and I was always like interested in nature and like going to the pond and collecting the water and looking at it under the microscope, and just I was a nerd basically. And
sure.
um yeah, and but it always had this weird kind of like cosmological esoteric thing to it that I didn't realize until much later. And then yeah, then but I was always already also always really into music. And I don't know, when I was like 13 or so, like I got into music pretty seriously, and then that was my thing for a long time. uh like into college, and I majored in music. And but it was like freshman year of college, I read the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and the Tao Te Ching, and with each one I was like, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, I just felt like I knew it. Oh, also saw the Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth, when I was like 17, in an English class, and was also like, yes, 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 yes. And uh yeah, and so that kind of like planted a seed. And then I think I like dabbled in meditation here and there in college. Like I just walked into the Zen center. I was really depressed. I got really depressed like senior year or junior year of college.
sure.
um and I like just walked into the Zen center and like sat down during a sit and like started meditating. And somebody came up to me afterward and was like, who are you? Why are you here? Do you even know what you're doing?" And I was like, I don't know." And so he kind of showed me what to do. And then like I kind of, yeah, I meditated here and there. And then actually the first book that really got me like technically like sitting down and doing something, it was a John Kabat-Zinn's The Mindful Way Through Depression. And it worked. I mean, I was like this close to going on meds, and then through meditation, I got a little bit better, and it was fine. And then I don't know, I stopped. I think a lot of people do this thing of like they dip their toe in the water with meditation, then like and they kind of like it, and it kind of makes their life a little bit better, and then they kind of get on to other things.
Right.
And and I think at that point too, I was approaching it in the way that a lot of people do, like mindfulness will make you a more productive person.
Hmm.
It's like, be more creative, be more productive at work. And it's like really sold that way. And I wanted to be more creative and productive, like as a musician. And then I did, and I stopped meditating. And then, yeah, so a bunch of other stuff. But then what really kicked me into the whole thing, like consciously, uh, really stepping onto the path, was when I was 26. My sister died, and she was actually, we both lived in New York at the time. I was going to grad school. She was in college or just graduated, and she became like overnight, like very mentally ill. And we were very close. And so that was like a nightmarish thing, just dealing with what she was going through. And and then after she died, then I saw mediums and things. I wanted to like connect with her. And then that led me into astrology and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then my mom also really got onto a spiritual path after that as well. And she suggested that I go to the shamanic journeying group. And I did a couple of times, and it just felt like I was just, it's where you do a drum journey.
Hmm.
And it just felt like I was just making stuff up in my imagination. It didn't feel like that big a thing or anything. And then I went to one, and it just felt like it was like, whoa, okay, something just happened. And then I got really into it. And there was this weird synchronicity that happened that day that really blew my mind. I can talk about that, but I don't need to, but because it's the whole thing. But the combination of like the powerful journey and the like really kind of, for me at the time, mind-blowing synchronicity, I was just like, what the hell? And like I just went all in with that. And that led me down a path where I then kind of became interested in psychedelics. I had a bad trip when I was like 18 and swore I would never do them again. But then I was like, maybe I want to do it. And then I did. And like the day after my first psychedelic trip, the experience was incredible. And I was like kissing the ground for the next 2 weeks, and just like, from now on, I will meditate. No questions asked. It will happen. and, um, and then shortly that led me to discover Raja, because I had heard about Kundalini, and I knew it as basically like a way to give yourself a permanent psychedelic trip. At least that's what was in my mind at the time.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a little bit different than that, but it's kind of is. And
Yeah.
but I was like, yeah, sign me up. And yeah, and then then it's the whole thing. I mean, it's too much to tell.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. I guess if I could just backtrack a little bit,
Yeah,
your first mentor, Richard Stromer, if you could
yeah.
talk a little bit about that relationship and how that kind of
Oh
played
yeah, yeah.
journey.
So Richard, again, this was somebody that my mom directed me to. And uh my mom, it's interesting when I look at it, my mom's always been this like big catalyst in my spiritual life.
Mm.
My actual biological mom, and then of course, my whole spiritual practice is like very divine mother centered. So um yeah, but Richard, he is an astrologer. Well, he's actually he calls himself a personal mythologist. And so he got like a PhD at Pacifica Graduate Institute in mythology. And they're kind of in the whole Joseph Campbell vein over there. And um, I had a birth chart reading with him that like lasted like 4 hours. And like it was like in so much detail, and just so like, and I was like sort of interested in astrology at that point, but like this was the first time that I was just like, wow, like what the heck, like what, how did you know that? And
Paradigm.
it
Yeah.
just resonated so strongly. And so then after that, I kind of got into astrology. And then I was turning it over in my head, like, should I start doing sessions with Richard? Because he did this coaching, this kind of like personal mythology coaching. And then at a certain point, I just woke up one day and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I mean, it was just such a blessing because, this is one of the things that I think is really like generally important that is there's not a lot of space for in our culture, which is mentorship.
Sure.
Uh, I think people go to therapists a lot of the time looking for a mentor, which is fine. There's nothing against therapy per se, but it's not really the right thing all the time, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um, but it's what we have. And the unfortunate thing about it is that it's very clinical. It's a kind of artificially set up kind of relationship, which is, there are good reasons for that, ethical boundaries, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. It's appropriate in certain circumstances. But for me, I absolutely needed somebody with whom I could have a real relationship, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And you can't quite have a real relationship with a therapist. You just can't. It's
Mm.
not like legal to do so.
Yeah.
so um so yeah, so when people would ask like who he was to me, I'd say he was like my not therapist. And really,
It's great.
we just
Yeah.
got together and kind of looked at the deeper dimensions of life, kind of archetypally. We'd look at my dreams, we'd look at the kind of like mythic dimensions of life, which we all live. It's a very, it really is true that we're all kind of living a myth in a certain way.
Sure.
And discovering what that is and how to relate to it in a constructive way rather than an unconscious way it's a good thing. So
I guess I'm going to go back to the Kundalini topic, and you kind of touched upon that. I think that there's maybe a little bit of a stigma around Kundalini, because a lot of people might practice or dabble in Kundalini without really knowing what they're doing.
yeah.
And you were talking about mentorship. So, how important is a guru or a mentor in taking you through those steps to have that significant Kundalini awakening?
Well, Raja, who's our teacher, he's not a guru, right? And he
Yeah.
doesn't cast himself as a guru. And now he's worked with a lot of gurus, but his own approach has never been to like devote himself to a guru completely, right?
Mm.
And that's the thing in the tradition. They generally say in the tradition, like, you need a guru,
Yeah.
like you must have a guru. Um, and I think there's a lot of cultural kind of baggage around that, but I can see the value of it. I truly can see the value of it, but it's also something that is so easily distorted. And then you hear all of the stories about all the gurus who do bad stuff and because they can get away with it and just
Yeah.
and which leads into a whole other topic about like spiritual realization versus like psychological healing. And I
Mm.
think you can't ideally you should have both, and sometimes people have one and not the other, and which is also possible. But yeah, I mean, I think mentorship is important, guidance is important, somebody who knows the territory, who's at least a few steps ahead of you is important because what happens when you awaken Kundalini is that life gets weird. It does. And this is the reason why you hear so many like horror stories about Kundalini. Um, why people can feel like they're losing it.
Mm.
They become very unbalanced and everything is because you suddenly just a lot more comes into your awareness than you are capable of handling, and you can't necessarily turn it off. And it can be scary and unsettling. And if the container isn't ready to handle the voltage that's coming through, then you can have problems. So good preparation with Kundalini or any other kind of spiritual work, deep initiatic kind of work, preparation is really important, guidance is really important. But I think that in a modern context, it's also important not to be like slavishly devoted to an individual,
Right.
because I do think that it's a fine line, you know. We do have to give up a lot of who we think we are, but at the same time, I do think that developing a kind of non-egotistical individuality is also part of the equation for a lot of modern seekers. So
Yeah, yeah. I kind of wanted to speak a little bit about your Thousand Sons experience. You stated that the experience was like seeing the purpose and context of every moment you had ever lived, the integration of lifetimes of learning, the resolution of lifetimes worth of karma, the experience of 10,000 volts of divine feminine energy lighting up your entire being, the experience of the void and infinite bliss, the experience of unconditional love, and the knowledge that is an illusion and it is possible to free your mind. Now that to me, that blew my mind just reading it. I'm like that. I can do that without
yeah,
taking a bunch of
well,
drugs, like and meditating.
yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, so it's been a combination of the Kundalini meditation work and psychedelics kind of doing this baton relay with one another.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
and because what kind of happened with me is that like I would work in the sadhana in the tantric practice for a certain amount of time, and then I would have a psychedelic experience that would like take me to a level of experience that I had never imagined
Mm,
uh, before, even given all my psychedelic experience. And it became this kind of like exponential immersion into consciousness that was like heavily amplified. Um that first big awakening experience, it came during an LSD trip, but it lasted like it changed like for like a good year or two after that. It was just like continents of my baggage were just gone, just instantly from that moment. And what had happened was that it really was like, well, just like I described, of like seeing, sometimes like it's described like life reviews and near death experiences where you
mm,
just like in a flash see every moment that you've ever lived.
yeah.
And it was like that. And my thing my thing has always been, and I think it is for a lot of people, just like resistance and fear and like anxiety, and
Sure.
I tend to have my ego is a very neurotic ego.
Same.
And um like very and and what had happened was that Hillary and I were living in Maui at the time, and it was during COVID,
And
and she wanted to
your
have some.
partner currently?
Yeah, Hillary's my partner. Yeah, and it was during COVID, and she wanted to have some friends come out and visit, and like I was paranoid about getting COVID, and I didn't want them to come,
Yeah.
and I was all like, in the of that time, like fully just, yeah, subsumed by it, and and she was like insisting that they come, and I was like getting like so angry, like Yosemite Sam, like hopping mad, like and finally, like I caved. I felt that I caved and let them come, and they came, and we all did this journey together, and in the journey, um, it just I had that experience, and their presence was like integral to it happening, which was really amazing. And they had both had experiences like that before, and afterward it was just like we felt this very tight bond between each other, and we have become this very kind of close family ever since then. And it's hard to describe the level of continued kind of like resonance between us that continues to further all our own awakenings. So that was part of it. And then after that, yeah, then after that, my experiences just started to get a lot deeper, both in meditation and in the journeys. And then the really big experience came after I did a Bufo 5-MeO journey.
Mm.
And then I did have a kind of uncontrollable Kundalini, a little bit of a meltdown for a few months after that, where I was like sleeping like 4 hours a night. And I even had this dream at one point where like, and this was how I felt during that time. Um, I had this dream where it was like I was on a tropical island. It was like a volcanic island covered in jungle, and the volcano was erupting, and the whole jungle was like full of lightning, and snakes were like leaping out of it. And like, and I was just like walking around with my eyes just like
Yeah.
for very. I don't recommend that kind of thing, and actually, it's since then that I've really seen that like, okay, if you are doing Kundalini work and you are doing psychedelics at the same time, like be very, very careful.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you got to be careful, because I have always thought and seemed to be able to integrate things well, but after that took a while. I mean, it's still something that like um there was stuff that came up that I think what is so crucial when you get into these deeper levels of initiation is that you are willing to see everything. You can't hide any aspect of yourself from yourself, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like yeah, I don't know. It's that idea that like everything will be revealed, right?
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's wow. That's powerful. Yeah. That's some powerful shit, man.
it
Powerful.
is, yeah, and
Powerful.
but like, and I also want to be careful to say that like, okay, I've gone out and communicated about it, but I'm also like, I'm in a way, it's like I'm growing hesitant to talk about it, because like there is this thing that you'll notice as you go deeper on your journey, is that like you just need to let things go. Even your most tremendous experiences, they're just experiences,
Mm.
right? B, you talk about things and you talk about them too much, you start believing your own bullshit. It starts feeding back. It starts to create almost in spite of yourself, even if you know better, it starts to create a kind of ego for you. And you can just see it. It's like I can start to see it forming outside of me. Like, and in those moments, I'm just like, oh shit. Like, because I know that I'm gonna have to go
Right.
down again. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, but so those experiences, I don't think everybody needs to have experiences like those. I don't think that it makes you special to have experiences like those. I think that it it's really cool. I mean, look, there's a part of me that's just an adventurer that like loves to experience whatever I can. But I've also learned at this point that like even that is not something that should really be guiding me. It's like I feel that all of this was just shown to me because I needed a very, maybe because I'm so thick-headed, that I just needed to have my everything just fucking bashed in so that I could be like, okay, 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 I get it. I will stop being a dick. you know?
uh, so I'm gonna segue a little bit into back to the music and the way that music has helped you look at the universe. You stated that you see life and the cosmos as a piece of music, and that your work in music helped prepare you to understand the laws of vibration. So if you can go into that and maybe a little bit into the cosmic laws,
Yeah,
that'd be yeah helpful for newcomers.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, so I've been a musician forever. And actually, when I kind of got onto this path, part of what it was, after my sister died, Like I got really heavy into my music career, and I was like really ambitious, really goal oriented. Like I had high hopes and dreams, and like exerted a lot of effort to like be the best, and like, play the hell out of the piano and like compose awesome stuff, like whatever. And worked really hard on it.
Mm.
But then it got so much ego investment in it. And then when that early on in the journey, that imploded on itself. And after that, I just kind of gave music up for a while. But yeah, I was starting to see, because so first of all, I learned astrology, and they talk about this idea of music of the spheres. There really is something to that. When you know how to read an astrological chart, you start to see that yeah, I mean, that there is this intelligent interweaving of everything all the time, and you can start to see into it in a way that you weren't able to see into it before. And so it's kind of like that idea that, if you've ever experienced a really cool synchronicity, like just one of those inexplicable, meaningful coincidences, you just feel like the universe is put together with more harmony and intelligence than you previously thought.
Mm.
And then what happened when I started to do astrology is that, like, I just saw that was the nature of things. It was just all the time, you know.
Right.
It just happens to be that we don't always see it. But I mean, really crazy things, down to the point that uh, the Bill Withers song, like, ain't no sunshine when she's gone. All right.
Love
I
that.
hear that line and I'm like, okay, Bill Withers must have an alignment of sun, moon, and Saturn. Why? Well, because sunshine, easy enough. Um, the moon relates to the feminine, so she. Saturn, it's negation, and so when she's gone, Saturn brings all the bummers. So sun, moon, Saturn equals ain't no sunshine when she's gone. And like that's just a very simple example, but that kind of stuff happens all the time, like
Mm.
all the freaking time. And so when you start to see that, and you realize that it actually is predictable, like in that way, astrology works very differently than I think most people think about it. They think about it as a personality system, like, yeah, you can use it like that. Yeah, you can use it for fortune telling to a certain extent, but it's way weirder, you know. So there's that, and that taught me to kind of see into things like that. And I think that yeah, being a musician helped me take to it more easily, because because there's this level of thinking. It's like non-conceptual thinking, or just like a kind of perception of like the whole doing its thing and letting it affect you. You know how it is that like music, like we all get music, right? You don't need to play music to be able to listen to music, right? If you play music and if you know a little bit of music theory, it might deepen your appreciation, but you don't need it. We all know it. And that's kind of the way life is, right? So with these esoteric practices, we start to learn to play it a little bit better. That's essentially what I see magic as being. Then astrology maybe is like music theory. It's like we learn to read the score a little bit. Uh, 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 yeah, and interestingly too, the amazing thing about music is that it just doesn't make any sense. There's no reason why music should mean anything, and it doesn't need to mean anything, but it can make you feel stuff. It can conjure up images, or it can take you to places that really no word, no emotion, no image can quite describe. It just is. And it's always uh existing in this state of flow. You can't isolate a moment of music. It only exists in the totality of the flow of it, like life. So it's a great metaphor. And I think it's in a way more than a metaphor. And lately too, I've been getting back to playing music more because I've also found that it's like I love teaching about this stuff, and yeah, I'm doing a PhD and everything, but there are, I've had a lot of experiences that while I can talk about them in a certain way or I can point to them in a certain way, I really can't express them. And even like trying to express them, like I can feel it almost like shredding my mind apart. So it's like um I have to do music. It's like music is a way to somehow off gas that information. So so yeah, there's that too. And all kinds of weird mysteries, about sound. And I've heard, there are like legend, and I don't know, did Atlantis exist? Did it not? I'm very open minded and skeptical at the same time about things. It's like I'm not a believer, but I'll buy into it to the extent that I need to like see what I
Yeah.
can get from. And there's this idea that in Atlantis they used to like use sound to encode information into big jars of water. and like and I can see it, man. I can see how it could be. I mean, I can't do it, but I can there's something in me that's like, yeah, that makes sense. So I don't know.
That's incredible. Well, Alex, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. I would love
Oh,
to,
okay.
yeah, I'd love to do a follow-up, and maybe go a little bit into archetypal astrology, and maybe you could shed some light on that for the listeners. But thank you so much for joining us on Sunseeker Podcast. It's been absolutely amazing journey, and I've learned so much. Thank you.
Anytime. Anytime. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Nice, dude. You did a good job. Okay. So this is the thing that happened is that I didn't get Zoom Pro, so it only gave me 40 minutes.